Do you think people can change? I know places can certainly change and environments can change over time. You see, in this story today, there's a girl that probably is desperate to change in some way, but at the start of the story, she describes herself as mean and hard and ugly. And in truth, she does some pretty mean things at the start of this story. One day, she makes a rather magical discovery. Now, there are sometimes stories that come along that are just so incredible that they touch your heart and fire your imagination, and this is one story that definitely does that. You definitely need this story in your heart. It's a story about transformation and it's a story about change. The story is called The Promise by Nicola Davies and Laura Carlin. It's one of my favourite books. And I'm just wondering, what is that promise? And indeed, whether or not that girl can change from being mean and hard and ugly. Let's find out. The Promise by Nicola Davies. When I was young, I lived in a city that was mean and hard and ugly. Its streets were as dry as dust, cracked by heat and cold, and never blessed with rain. A gritty yellow wind blew constantly, scratching round the buildings like a hungry dog. Nothing grew. Everything was broken. No one ever smiled. The people had grown as mean and hard and ugly as their city, and I was mean and hard and ugly too. I lived by stealing from those who had almost as little as I did. My heart was as shriveled as the dead trees in the park. And then, one night, I met an old lady down a dark street. She was frail and alone, an easy victim. Her bag was fat and full, but when I tried to snatch it from her, she held on with the strength of heroes. To and fro we pulled that bag, until at last she said, "If you promise to plant them, I'll let go." What did she mean? I didn't know or care. I just wanted the bag, so I said, "All right, I promise." She loosened her grip at once and smiled at me. I ran off without a backward look, thinking of the food and the money in her bag. But when I opened it, there were only acorns. I stared at them, so green, so perfect, and so many, and understood the promise I had made. I held a forest in my arms, and my heart was changed. I forgot about the food and the money, and for the first time in my life I felt lucky, rich beyond my wildest dreams. I slept with the acorns for my pillow, my head full of leafy visions, and in the morning I began to keep my promise. I planted beside roads, on roundabouts, among rubble, ruins and rusty railings, by train tracks, tram lines and traffic lights, in abandoned parks and gardens laced with broken glass, behind factories and shopping malls, at bus stops, cafes and blocks of flats. I pushed aside the mean and the hard and the ugly, and I planted. Nothing changed at first. The gritty wind still scratched the parched, cracked streets. The people scowled and scuttled to their homes like cockroaches, but slowly, shoots of green began to show. Trees. First here and there, then everywhere. People came to the streets to see. They touched the leaves in wonder and smiled. They took tea together by the tiny trees. They talked and laughed. And pretty soon they were planting too. Trees and flowers, fruit and vegetables, in parks and gardens, on balconies and rooftops. Green
spread through the city like a song, breathing to the sky, drawing down the rain like a blessing. But by then, I was already far away, planting in another sad and sorry city, and another, and another, and another. And last night, in a lonely alley, a young thief fought me for my sack of acorns. I smiled and made the old bargain, knowing how a heart can change, knowing that my planting will go on.
There are just so many activities that you could do from this story. Download them for free on our Literary Counts website. Perhaps you'd like to write a sequel, a What Happened Next, or a prequel, what made the city and the people that lived there so mean and hard and ugly at the start of the story. You could definitely do some diary writing, maybe enroll as the girl perhaps. How would her diary look at the beginning of the story compared to the end of the story, and how might you show those changes to her character? You could definitely do some drawing. Think about the techniques that have been used on those illustrations. It seems to me that they've done some pencil drawings and rubbed them out in some ways, but perhaps you might want to use watercolours, or maybe tear up some newspapers and do some kind of collage of the city. You could definitely think about the shapes that are in this story and consider how they relate to the shapes in your environment, and you could group these or categorise them in some kind of way. But most importantly, having read this story, you need to go and plant something. This could be on your windowsill, or you've got a garden. You could think about planting something outside. Now, whatever it is you decide to do, make sure you get a grown-up or a parent or a teacher to share the wonderful things that you have been doing with us. We would love to find out what you've done as a result of this incredible story. You could share those on Instagram, on Facebook, or indeed on Twitter. Until next time, go plant.